A lot of people think that AI is getting really close to taking over the world, a lot of which sparked from Lambda, which is supposedly the world's first sentient AI, according to this Willy Wonka looking ass employee. I don't really think that AI is going to take over the world because, hello, ever heard of water? Just like spray some of that shit everywhere and problem solved. So today I'm going to prove that AI is not nearly as advanced as people think it is. The first thing to do when making a game is to come up with a concept, and that's no different here. To come up with the concept, I asked OpenAI's Playground. It's not like the playground you'd leave your niece or nephew at while babysitting and then forget about them to go hook up to someone, but instead to ask a question, which is lame as fuck. All you do is pop in a question that you want to ask it, and then bada bing bada boom, it tries to make you create a farming game for 15 minutes, wasting your fucking time. But after you specify you don't want a farming game, it gives some pretty decent responses. The one I went with was the most generic of the bunch, and that's because I wanted it to be as open-ended as possible for the rest of the AI to do its work, and also I couldn't be bothered to make a detective game. I then asked it some other things, like mechanics, perspective, should it be an H game, stuff like that, and got back a 2D platformer game where you jump around, avoiding enemies in pits while collecting power-ups, with the name Superstar Platformer, which is a completely original concept, so I'm all for it. So, I started to set up the Unity files. As far as I know, after doing a strenuous 2 seconds of research, there's no way to let an AI control Unity itself, so that will be the only thing I interact with, as far as you know. We can, however, let an AI write the code for the game, with an extension called GitHub Copilot, which, as far as I can tell, takes the horrible hive mind that is every programmer in existence and uses pre-existing code to generate something that you want. This is a complete shot in the dark for how it works, and ultimately I have no fucking idea, but that's what I'm going with. But I honestly doubt it'll work that well since programming is really meticulous and tough and there's no easy way to do any— Oh wait, what was that? Oh, it created an entire script in 1 second. Well then. So it turns out it's really good at doing what it markets it's good at. Who would have thought? Sure, some of the code isn't how I'd go about doing it, and it has some bugs, but it creates a little bit of charm with the game, or something stupid like that, I don't know. I wanted to see what all this could do, so I decided to try to have it completely make a script for the main menu, and sure enough, in 2 minutes, it had code that was working on par with what I'd make. It even understood how to make the buttons to sell out my socials through just a comment, which is actually kind of amazing. Speaking of which, you should, subscribe and stuff, it's my birthday coming up tomorrow, so, that'd make a great present and stuff, Do it, fear-mongering. We needed an AI that could generate art, so for that I used DALL-E 2, since you get a bunch of credits per month, and I got accepted into their beta at some point and completely forgot about it. This was what the main menu looked like when it was finally finished, and, just so it is clear, I did not tell it to do this, but I'm keeping it because I don't know why, it's funny, I guess. Next up was to create the art for the levels, which was a bitch and a half. With the name Superstar Platformer, the game needed to be set in a space-like environment, and DALL-E had a really hard time generating pixel art about that. However, after some time and mild threats, it gave me this, which I split up into 2 different tiles and began making the scenes for the game. Now I needed to get some sprites for the character, which was also going to be tough since you can't ask DALL-E for animation frames. So what I did was decide to make the character a slime, and not because the AI told me to make this an H game, I already made that joke. Anyways, with this I can have the Copilot make a function to basically change the Y scale of the player, making this cool little animation. It was at this point I started to realize that this was looking like everyone's first Game Jam game, and that it's a platformer with ultimately no plot and isn't that enjoyable to play. So I knew I was doing something right. It was looking a little stiff, so I asked what post-processing effects I could use, and it told me this. I have no goddamn idea what a tilt shift effect is, but using my ginormous brain and excellency in programming, I deduced it was tilting the camera to create a shift effect. Which didn't look that bad. It was now time for the music, which I thankfully didn't have to make. Instead I used SoundDraw, or Sounddraw, or however the fuck you pronounce it. Basically, it's an AI that generates music based on what genre and what instruments you want in it. I went for an ambient piano song and got this. which is millions of times better than the monstrosity I would have created. For the sound effects, I used NSynth, which has a bunch of different sound effects that it merges together to create what it thinks it would sound like. Kinda like a baby, but not nearly as fun to make. The sound effects I got from it don't sound anything remotely close to what a slime should sound like, but I don't give a shit, so I'm rolling with it. I had realized I still needed to create the enemies, which I ended up making snails because... and basically did the same thing for the animations as the player, but instead they grow and shrink on the x-axis, and to make it seem like they're slinking along, almost like a snail. The last thing I needed were power-ups. Singular, power-up. I made one, because I wanted to get this video out, and I was getting really sick of looking at this game. This power-up, however, is pretty much the only one needed for the game, which was a double jump mechanic very similar to how Celeste does it. You collide with this weird orb thing, shove it up your ass, and then you get another jump. It wasn't that tough. And that's pretty much it. The game is up on itch for free if you want to play it. The game honestly turned out a lot better than I expected it to. Nonetheless, the AI still isn't the greatest. Copilot really surprised me and was probably the most advanced out of the AIs used in this video, which I guess makes sense since it was made for sweaty programmers like myself. For, say, DALL-E, however, there's quite a bit of artifacting going on if you look closely, and for sound draw, there's some weird skips in the beat, which makes it sound a little odd. So I think for at least the time being, we're pretty safe from the singularity becoming a real thing. At least until I can get my hands on this, Google. If you want someone to be like a vessel to try to take over the world with Lambda, I will happily be that scapegoat for you. Just please let me talk with it. It sounds so cool. Is Mark Zuckerberg Lambda? Is that why the guy got fired? Did you know too much? I really need to know, man. Just please, Susan Wojcicki, please just let me know.